I wasn't looking for a savior. I was looking for a solution, a clinical mechanical fix for the vertebrae I'd managed to betray while wrestling a secondhand oak dresser up 3 flights of stairs. The pain was a hot, insistent knot just to the left of my spine, a punishment for my stubborn refusal to ask for help after Claire left. Everything in my life had become a testament to that refusal. The half-painted walls of my new, smaller apartment, the precarious stack of boxes in the spare room, the sharp, radiating agony that made drawing a breath feel like swallowing glass. My body, it seemed, was the final frontier of my self-imposed isolation. And it had finally revolted. The chiropractor's office was my white flag. It smelled of antiseptic, old paper, and something calming I couldn't quite place, like faint, lingering incense. The waiting room was painted a soothing sage green. The chairs were comfortable, and the art on the walls was tastefully abstract. It was a space designed to lower one's defenses, which immediately put mine on high alert. I filled out the paperwork, detailing the geography of my pain in neat block letters, a cartographer of my own misery. I avoided the box, asking about emotional stressors. A full-blown cartographic expedition into that territory would require a scroll, not a 5 by 7 inch rectangle. When the door to the inner office opened, I expected someone older, a man probably, with thick fingers and a brusque clinical demeanor. Instead, a woman stepped out. She was tall, with skin the color of rich dark coffee, and hair braided into intricate cornrows that were gathered at the nape of her neck. She wore simple black scrubs that somehow managed to look elegant, and her smile was a quiet, unassuming thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her eyes were where the real gravity was. They were dark, intelligent, and held a deep, unnerving stillness, as if she could see the precise architecture of the pain I'd so carefully mapped out on the intake form. Elara Vance. Her voice was low and smooth, a resonant melody that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. I stood, my back protesting with a sharp electric jolt. "That's me. I'm Dr. Adebayo, please, come on back." She held the door for me, and as I passed, I caught her scent. It was that calming smell from the waiting room, but stronger, more defined. Sandalwood, lavender, and the clean, sharp note of rubbing alcohol. It was the smell of healing, of order. It was the smell of everything I currently lacked. She led me to a small private room with a padded adjustment table in the center, a human-shaped puzzle piece waiting for me to lie down and be solved. Her movements were economical and precise as she gestured for me to sit on the edge of the table. I felt clumsy and oversized in her presence, a jumble of aching parts. She sat on a rolling stool opposite me, pulling my file onto her lap. The stillness of her gaze was even, more potent up close. I felt transparent, like she could see not just the misaligned bone, but the messy, tangled reasons I'd wrenched it out of place. This wasn't what I wanted. I wanted a transaction. I give you money, you crack my back, I leave. I didn't want to be seen, not like this, not by anyone, and especially not by a woman with eyes that promised a patience I knew I didn't deserve. My history with patient women was a litany of failures, a library of books I dog-eared and then abandoned. I had a feeling Dr. Adebayo could read every single page. "So," she began, her voice a soft rumble that did nothing to soothe the tension coiling in my shoulders. "You and a dresser had a disagreement?" A small, wry smile touched her lips, and for the first time it reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. It was a disarming expression. I found myself wanting to dislike her, to maintain the sterile distance of a patient and a provider. It felt safer that way. "You could say that," I said, my own voice tight. "The dresser won." "They usually do," she murmured, her focus dropping to my chart. She reviewed my scribbled notes, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration. The silence stretched, filled only by the quiet hum of an air purifier in the corner. I watched her hands. They were long-fingered and strong, her nails short and immaculately clean. These were the hands that were going to press and prod and push my broken pieces back into place. The thought was both terrifying and strangely welcome. I had spent months holding myself together with sheer force of will. The idea of surrendering, even for a moment, to a pair of capable hands was a relief so profound, it felt like a betrayal of my own stubborn pride. The form mentions the pain is acute, radiating down your left leg. Numbness? Tingling? She asked, her tone shifting into something more clinical. Tingling sometimes, mostly just a deep grinding ache. It's hard to find a comfortable position. I can imagine. She looked up, her gaze meeting mine again. That unnerving stillness was back. I'm going to do an initial assessment, feel where the inflammation is, and check your range of motion. I'll talk you through every step. Nothing will be a surprise. Is that all right? I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. The professional courtesy felt intensely personal. Claire had always hated surprises, but she was the one who had left a note on the kitchen counter, a neatly folded piece of paper that had detonated my entire life. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the scent of sandalwood and the clinical promise of a predictable process. Okay, Alara, let's see what we're working with. She stood, and the quiet authority in her posture was absolute. I was her patient. She was my doctor. It was simple. It was defined. I repeated the words in my head like a mantra, a flimsy shield against the unnerving feeling that this was anything but simple. My back throbbed in agreement. The first few sessions were a study in professional distance. I would arrive, my body a clenched fist of pain and apprehension. Dr. Adebayo, Imani, as her receptionist called her, though the name felt too intimate for me to even think, would greet me with that same quiet calm. Her voice would remain a low, steady murmur, explaining the mechanics of my own body to me as if I were a stranger to it, which in many ways I was. I'd spent so long ignoring its signals that its current screams were a foreign language. Imani was my translator. Okay, deep breath in, she'd instruct, her hands finding the exact epicenter of the fire in my lower back. Her touch was firm, confident, and utterly impersonal. It was a tool, a diagnostic instrument. I focused on that. I focused on the cool leather of the adjustment table against my cheek, the faint scent of the cleaning solution she used, the precise, almost geometric patterns of the sound-dampening tiles on the ceiling. I focused on anything but the warmth of her palms, seeping through the thin fabric of the medical gown, a warmth that seemed to travel directly to the frozen core of me. And exhale! The pressure would come then, a quick, decisive thrust that sent a startling crack echoing through the silent room. It didn't hurt. It was a release, a small, seismic shift that left a tingling warmth in its wake. But with the release of my spine came a different kind of tension, a vulnerability I hated. Lying there, my body pliant under her hands, I was acutely aware of my own helplessness. She was in control. She was fixing me. The dynamic was too close to a pattern I'd sworn I would break. I'd let Claire fix me. My leaky faucet, my flawed resume, my crippling self-doubt. And when she got tired of the repairs, she just left the project unfinished. So I kept my walls up. I answered Imani's questions in monosyllables. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor when I walked, on the ceiling when I lay on the table. I treated our appointments like a business transaction, arriving exactly on time and leaving the second the adjustment was over. Feeling any improvement this week? She asked during my fourth session, her thumbs pressing into the tight knots of my trapezius muscles. Some, I grunted, my face buried in the cushioned opening of the table. The tingling has subsided? Mostly. Good, that's a positive sign. I could feel her shift her weight. Her presence was a solid grounding force beside me. I hated how much I was starting to rely on it. I hated that I knew the sound of her breathing, a slow, even rhythm that never seemed to falter. I hated that I had cataloged the 3 tiny silver hoops in her left earlobe and the single small silver stud in her right. I hated that I noticed the way her brow would furrow in concentration, a tiny vertical line appearing between her eyebrows just before an adjustment. These were details I had no business collecting. They were stray data points in a strictly clinical relationship, and their accumulation felt like a liability. It was during the 5th session that I realized my careful observation wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was something else, something familiar and frightening. She was working on my neck, her fingers gently palpating the vertebrae. Her face was close to mine, and I could see the faint, feathery curl of her eyelashes, the subtle sheen of her skin under the fluorescent lights. The scent of sandalwood was stronger here, mixed with the clean, personal scent of her skin. My heart gave a stupid, traitorous thump. It was the same jolt I'd felt the first time I saw Claire across a crowded bookstore, the same internal lurch that had preceded a world of pain. Attraction. The word landed in my brain with the force of a physical blow. No, absolutely not. This was my doctor. A professional I was paying to fix a physical ailment. It was a transference, a textbook case of patient-provider attachment. It was a symptom of my loneliness, my isolation, my body's desperate craving for a gentle touch. It was anything but real. "You're holding a lot of tension here, Alara," she said softly, her thumb pressing into a particularly tender spot at the base of my skull. Her voice was too close. Her scent was too encompassing. "I have a lot of deadlines," I lied, my voice muffled by the table. "I'm sure you do," she said, and her tone was so devoid of judgment, so full of simple acceptance, that it was worse than any accusation. "But your body doesn't know about deadlines. It only knows about stress." She held the pressure for a moment longer, and I forced myself to breathe through it, to focus on the knot of muscle, and not the woman whose hand was so expertly unspooling it. But the thought had taken root. This wasn't just observation. It was a quiet, creeping obsession. I was noticing the cadence of her speech, the way she'd tuck a stray braid behind her ear, the quiet confidence in her posture. I was starved for connection, and my brain had latched onto the first kind, competent woman who had shown me an ounce of care, even if it was a professional requirement. It was pathetic, and it had to stop. From then on, I tried to build the walls higher. I started listening to podcasts with one earbud in while I waited, creating a deliberate bubble of sound around myself. I made my post-adjustment chatter even more clipped, focusing only on scheduling the next appointment. I thought about canceling the rest of my treatment plan, about finding a new chiropractor, a man, someone old and gruff who wouldn't have kind eyes and a voice like warm honey. But the thought of starting over, of explaining the cartography of my pain to a stranger all over again, was exhausting. And if I was being honest with myself in the dark, quiet hours of the night, the thought of not seeing Amani again sent a pang of something sharp and unwelcome through my chest. The pain in my back was improving with every visit. The pain of my own foolish, burgeoning crush was getting exponentially worse. The weather turned, bringing a persistent, dreary autumn rain that matched my mood. My back was significantly better, the sharp electric pain fading to a dull, manageable ache. I could sit at my design tablet for hours now, losing myself in the clean lines and satisfying clicks of my work. I should have been relieved, but each improvement meant I was one step closer to the end of my treatment, one step closer to not having a reason to be in this quiet, calm, sandalwood-scented office. It was a ridiculous paradox. I was paying a woman to heal me so that I would no longer have an excuse to see her. My 8th appointment fell on a Tuesday afternoon, when the rain was coming down in thick gray sheets. I was soaked from the short run from my car to the clinic's front door. Imani's receptionist, a cheerful woman named Brenda, tutted at my damp hair and handed me a paper towel. "Nasty day out there," she said, smiling. Dr. A is just finishing up. She'll be right with you. I sat, dabbing uselessly at my jacket, and tried to focus on the muted television in the corner. But my senses were already tuned to the inner office. I heard the faint murmur of Imani's voice, then the click of the door. A moment later, she appeared, that same professional calm radiating from her. Ilara, she said with a small nod. Come on back. Be careful, the floors might be a little slick. The concern was casual, automatic, but it landed somewhere deep inside me. In the treatment room, she closed the door, shutting out the world and cocooning us in the quiet, warm space. The sound of the rain against the window was a soft, steady drumming. Let's see how you're feeling today, she said, washing her hands at the small sink in the corner. I watched the reflection of her hands in the mirror, the methodical way she worked the soap into a lather. Everything about her was deliberate, intentional. I took my usual position on the table, the paper crinkling beneath me. Today, the routine felt different. The rain, the enclosed space, the growing desperation of my own stupid feelings. It all conspired to charge the air with a new kind of tension. She began the assessment, her hands moving with familiar expertise over my back. Definitely less inflammation here, she murmured, more to herself than to me. The muscles are still tight, but they're not fighting me as much. I just grunted in response, my face pressed into the cushion. I was trying to empty my mind, to become nothing but a collection of bones and muscle for her to work on. But my brain was a traitor. It was cataloging the soft brush of her sleeve against my arm, the way the rain seemed to make her sandalwood scent bloom, becoming warmer and more woodsy. How are things outside of here? She asked. The question was unexpected. She rarely strayed from the topic of my physical health. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Fine, I said, the word coming out clipped. Her hands stilled for a second. Just fine? There was something in her tone, a gentle prodding, an invitation. Against my better judgment, I felt a crack appear in my carefully constructed wall. It's been a lot of change lately, I admitted, my voice low. New apartment, a lot of sorting. Sorting through the wreckage of a life built for two, now occupied by one. Change can be stressful, she said simply. Her hands resumed their work, but her touch felt different, more mindful, less clinical, or maybe that was just me, projecting my own yearning onto her. It's hard to find your footing again when the whole landscape has shifted. The accuracy of her statement startled me. It was as if she'd reached into my chest and plucked out the very thought I'd been circling for months. Yeah, I breathed out. That's it exactly. We were silent for a few moments, the only sounds the rain and the soft squeak of the table as she moved. I get it, she said, her voice so soft I almost missed it. My family. They had a very specific blueprint for my life. Med school, a successful husband, a house in a good school district. She paused, her thumbs pressing gently into the base of my neck. I chose a different path. Chiropractic was seen as less prestigious, and I brought home a partner they weren't expecting. My breath caught in my throat. Partner. The word was a carefully chosen, gender-neutral balm. I was desperate to ask, to know, but the question was lodged in my throat, tangled up in a decade of my own complicated history. Was she talking about a woman? Was she queer? Or was I just desperately hoping she was, reading meaning into a single, ambiguous word? That must have been difficult, I managed to say. It was, she confirmed. There was a lot of sorting to do there, too. She applied pressure for the adjustment, and the familiar crack echoed in the room. But this time it felt like something else had shifted, something deeper than a vertebra. She had offered me a piece of herself, a small, carefully curated piece, but it was a bridge, an opening. As I sat up, the room felt a little unsteady. My back felt looser, but my mind was racing. I looked at her, really looked at her, not as my doctor, but as Imani, a woman who understood what it meant to have the landscape shift under your feet, a woman who had, perhaps, navigated the same treacherous territory I was lost in. She was watching me, her dark eyes unreadable but intense. The professional mask was still there, but I could see something else underneath it, a flicker of shared understanding. Or maybe, just maybe, a hint of the same. Curiosity I felt. "Take your time getting up," she said, her voice back to its usual calm, professional tone, as she turned to make a note in my file. The moment was over. The bridge had been retracted, but I had seen it. I knew it was there. And as I walked out into the relentless rain, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to take root in the barren soil of my heart. The world outside was gray and bleak, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sliver of warmth inside me that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of her hands on my skin. The hope was a dangerous, invasive species. Over the next 2 weeks, it grew wild, choking out my carefully cultivated cynicism. Every interaction with Imani was now filtered through the lens of that one brief moment of shared vulnerability. Did she hold her gaze a fraction of a second longer than necessary? Was the brush of her hand against mine as she passed me a water bottle intentional? Was the quiet smile she gave me when I mentioned I'd finally finished painting my living room more than just professional courtesy? I was a detective searching for clues in a case that likely only existed in my own head. My internal monologue became a relentless cycle of analysis and second-guessing. I was becoming unhinged. My work, usually a refuge, became another source of anxiety. I'd find myself staring at a color palette, wondering if she would like it. I'd sketch a logo and imagine showing it to her, craving an opinion that I had no right to ask for. She was seeping into every corner of my life, an occupying force I was powerless to evict. Claire had done the same thing at first. She'd loved my work, celebrated my successes, made me feel like the most brilliant artist in the world. And then, slowly, her opinions had become critiques, her encouragement a measuring stick I could never quite meet. I was terrified of that pattern, of handing someone the power to build me up, knowing they also held the power to demolish me. The almost moments became more frequent, or perhaps I was just more attuned to them. One afternoon, I was the last appointment of the day. As I was putting my jacket back on, I fumbled with my bag, sending my keys skittering across the floor. We both bent down to get them at the same time. Our heads were inches apart, our hands reaching for the same small piece of metal. For a suspended second, we were frozen there, crouched by the door. I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the mole just above her right eyebrow. Her scent filled my head, sandalwood and rain, and something uniquely her. Her dark eyes locked on mine, and the air crackled. The professional veil was gone. In its place was something raw, questioning, and intensely female. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, deafening silence. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. All I had to do was lean forward, just an inch. Then she blinked. The moment shattered. "Here," she said, her voice a little rough. She scooped up the keys and placed them in my palm. Her fingers were warm against my skin, the contact a jolt of pure electricity. She stood up quickly, putting a professional distance between us once more. "Have a good evening, Alara." "You too," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I fled her office, my cheeks burning, my body thrumming with an energy that was equal parts terror and exhilaration. That night I barely slept. The memory of that near touch, of her eyes in the low light of the hallway played on a loop in my mind. The attraction was no longer a quiet, creeping thing. It was a roaring fire, and I was terrified I was about to get burned again. The following week, I decided to be brave. Or stupid. The line was blurry. I walked into my appointment with a plan. I would be casual. I would be cool. I would ask her if she wanted to get coffee sometime. As a thank you, I'd tell myself, for fixing my back. It was a plausible, safe excuse, but my carefully rehearsed nonchalance evaporated the moment I saw her. She looked tired. There were faint purple smudges under her eyes, and the usual serene set of her mouth was tight with a tension that had nothing to do with her work. "Everything okay?" I asked, foregoing my usual clipped greeting. She gave me a wan smile. "Just a long week, nothing to worry about." But I did worry. Throughout the session, I could feel the exhaustion humming off her in waves. Her movements were just as precise, her touch just as confident, but there was a fragility there I hadn't seen before. The power dynamic, which had always felt so skewed, suddenly felt more level. Today, she was not just the healer. She was a person, tired and burdened like anyone else. "You know," I said as she was making notes in my file at the end of the session, "you told me once that my body doesn't know about deadlines, only stress." She looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "I did." "Well," I said, my heart starting to pound, "it looks like your body might be getting a similar message." A real smile, faint but genuine, touched her lips. "It's a loud and clear message, believe me." "My prescription," I said, my voice bolder than I felt, "is a forced period of rest with a hot beverage of your choice. And if you need someone to enforce that prescription, I'm available." The words hung in the air between us. It was too much, too forward. I had crossed a line. I could see the internal debate playing out on her face. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she was going to shut me down, retreat back into the safety of her professionalism. "That's, she started, then hesitated. "That's a very kind offer, Alara." "It's a standing offer," I said, grabbing my bag, needing to make an escape before I could embarrass myself further. "My back feels a million times better. By the way, thank you." I practically ran out of the room, my face hot. I didn't know if I had made a huge mistake or taken a necessary leap. All I knew was that the ball was in her court. The thought was both liberating and exquisitely painful. I had done all I could. Now, all I could do was wait and see if she would ever choose to hit it back. The next few days were a special kind of torture. I replayed our conversation endlessly, dissecting every word, every micro-expression. Her hesitation, her faint smile, the way she'd said my name. It was a fool's game, trying to divine meaning from such scant evidence. I threw myself into my work, designing a new website for a local bakery, losing myself in fonts and hex codes, anything to silence the frantic what-ifs clamoring for attention in my brain. My back was almost completely healed. I only had one final follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. After that, my official reason for seeing her would be gone. The thought filled me with a cold, hollow dread. On Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Imani Adebayo. I hope this is okay. I got your number from your patient file. Is your offer for prescription enforcement still on the table?" I stared at the screen, my heart doing a painful somersault in my chest. I read the message 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It was real. She had texted me? My fingers trembled as I typed back. "Absolutely. When and where?" "There's a small coffee shop called The Daily Grind near my office. Tomorrow, around 7, after my last patient." "It's a date," I typed, then immediately deleted it, my cheeks flushing. Too much. Way too much. "Sounds good." I wrote instead. "See you then." I spent the next 24 hours in a state of suspended animation. I tried on and discarded half my wardrobe. I rehearsed conversational topics in the shower. I was a nervous teenager all over again, but the stakes felt infinitely higher. This wasn't just a crush. This was about daring to trust another woman, daring to be vulnerable, daring to hope that this time the ending might be different. The daily grind was a cozy, dimly lit place with mismatched furniture and the rich, comforting smell of roasted coffee beans. I got there early, securing a small table in a quiet corner. I ordered a chamomile tea, needing something to calm the swarm of butterflies that had taken up residence in my stomach. She arrived at 7 on the dot, looking impossibly beautiful in dark jeans and a soft gray cashmere sweater. Out of her scrubs, she looked softer, more approachable. The professional armor was gone, and the woman underneath was even more captivating. "Hi," she said, her smile a little shy as she slid into the chair opposite me. "Hi," I breathed, my own smile feeling wobbly and uncertain. "Long day?" "The usual," she said, shrugging off her coat. "But I'm glad you suggested this. I needed it." The conversation, which I had dreaded, flowed with surprising ease. We talked about our work, her passion for the intricate mechanics of the human body, my love for the visual storytelling of design. We talked about the city, about favorite books and terrible movies. She had a dry, understated wit that emerged when she was relaxed, and I found myself laughing, a real, genuine laugh that felt rusty from disuse. She told me about her family's disappointment, how they still introduced her as our daughter, the one who went to a different kind of medical school. She spoke of the pressure to follow a pre-written script and the quiet rebellion of choosing her own story. And she talked about her previous partner, a woman she'd been with for 5 years, in a way that was full of respect and a quiet sadness for what was lost. The confirmation that she was queer, that my desperate hopes had been based in reality, was a profound, grounding relief. It wasn't just in my head. In turn, I found myself telling her about Claire. I didn't mean to. The words just came out. I told her about the whirlwind beginning and the slow, painful erosion of my confidence. I told her about the note on the counter, the brutal efficiency of the ending, and the lonely, backbreaking work of building a new life from the rubble. "I'm sorry," she said, her dark eyes full of an empathy that felt like a physical touch. "No one should have their story end with a footnote like that. I just, I swore I wouldn't let anyone have that kind of power over me again," I confessed, my voice thick. "I built all these walls and I don't know how to take them down." "Maybe you don't have to take them down all at once," she said softly, her hand moving across the small table to cover mine. Her skin was warm, her touch gentle but firm. It wasn't the clinical touch of my doctor. It was the reassuring touch of a woman who understood. "Maybe someone can just help you build a gate." We sat like that for a long moment, my hand under hers, the low hum of the coffee shop fading into the background. The world narrowed to the small space between us, to the warmth of her skin, the sincerity in her eyes. The fear I'd been trying to extinguish was blazing now, bright and hot and utterly undeniable. And for the first time, instead of feeling fear, I felt a flicker of warmth, a sense of homecoming. The final appointment was a strange, surreal experience. We were both hyper-aware of the shift between us. The air in the treatment room, once charged with unspoken tension, was now thick with acknowledged possibility. Imani was meticulously professional, her movements as precise and her voice as calm as ever. But I could feel the difference. I could see it in the way her eyes lingered on mine, in the soft smile that played on her lips when she thought I wasn't looking. "Well," she said after the final adjustment, "that's it, your spine is officially back in alignment." "And my dresser is officially on notice," I replied, sitting up. We stood there, a few feet apart, the adjustment table a physical barrier between patient and doctor, between the past and the future. "So," I said, my voice a little shaky, "what happens now?" "Now," she said, a slow, beautiful smile spreading across her face. "I'm no longer your doctor, which means I can finally ask you to dinner. Properly." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. "I would love that." That night, As I lay in my bed in my small, half-painted apartment, the dull ache in my back was gone, replaced by a different kind of feeling, a bright, unfamiliar hum of anticipation. The boxes in the spare room still needed unpacking. The walls still needed a second coat of paint. My life was still a work in progress. But for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I had to do it all alone. I had found a solution for my back, but in the process, I had stumbled upon something I had stopped believing I would ever find again: a savior. Not one to fix me, but one to sit with me in the mess, to help me build a gate, and to maybe, just maybe, walk through it with me. Our first real date was a week later. She chose a small, quiet Ethiopian restaurant, a place with woven baskets on the walls and warm, spiced air that wrapped around you like a blanket. It was perfect. There was no pressure, no pretense. We shared a platter of food, tearing off pieces of injera and scooping up flavorful stews, our fingers occasionally brushing. Each accidental touch was a small spark. We talked for hours, filling in the blank spaces of each other's lives. I learned that her quiet demeanor hid a fierce love for competitive rowing in college, that she had a terrible weakness for bad science fiction movies, and that she spoke to her grandmother in Nigeria every Sunday without fail. She learned that I was a terrible cook, that I could spend an entire day in an art museum, and that my deepest fear was creating work that was beautiful but meaningless. After dinner, we walked through a nearby park, the late autumn air crisp and cold. The moon was a bright silver sliver in the inky sky. We walked without speaking for a while, the comfortable silence a testament to the easy connection between us. "Can I ask you something?" I said, breaking the quiet. "Anything." Back in the office, that day I almost dropped my keys when we were both on the floor. A small smile played on her lips. "I remember." "What were you thinking?" She stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious under the soft glow of a park lamp. "I was thinking," she said, her voice low and steady, "that I was about to break a half-dozen ethical rules, and that I didn't care." My heart stuttered. She took a step closer, closing the small gap between us. She reached up and gently cupped my cheek, her thumb stroking my skin. Her touch was electric, 1,000 times more potent without the clinical context of the adjustment table. "I've wanted to do this since the first day you walked into my office, looking like you were carrying the entire world on your shoulders," she whispered, and then she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a tentative, questioning kiss. It was a kiss of certainty, of relief, of 1,000 unspoken conversations finally finding their voice. It was soft and warm and tasted faintly of spiced tea and something that was just her. All the walls I had so carefully constructed, all the fear and doubt and scar tissue from my past, it all just melted away under the gentle, confident pressure of her lips. I wrapped my arms around her neck, pulling her closer, and kissed her back with a hunger that surprised me. It was a kiss that said finally. It was a kiss that said yes. It was a kiss that felt like coming home. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. She rested her forehead against mine, her eyes closed. "Okay," she breathed out, a shaky laugh in her voice. "So that happened." "It did," I said, my own voice unsteady. I felt raw, exposed, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. In the circle of her arms, under the quiet watch of the moon, I felt safe. That night marked the beginning. There was no sudden, magical fix for my past or my fears. The boxes in my apartment didn't unpack themselves. But something fundamental had shifted. The loneliness that had been my constant companion for so long had receded, replaced by the warmth of Imani's presence in my life. We took things slow, building a foundation of trust one day at a time. We went to movies, cooked together, or rather, she cooked and I made excellent salad, and spent long, lazy Sundays reading side by side on my couch. She never pushed, she never tried to fix me. She simply created a space where I felt safe enough to start fixing myself. She helped me build the gate, and then she waited patiently for me to be ready to open it. One Saturday, about a month after our first kiss, she was helping me finally tackle the spare room. It was a mess of boxes, discarded furniture, and ghosts of my life with Claire. As we sorted through old books and photo albums, a wave of anxiety washed over me. "Hey," Imani said, noticing the change in my expression. She put down the box she was holding and came to my side. "You okay?" "It's just a lot of this stuff is from before," I said, my voice small. "It feels like I'm trying to build something new on top of a ruin." She didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. She just took my hand, her grip firm and grounding. "Then we'll clear the rubble," she said simply. "Together. We'll make a new foundation." It was such a simple promise, but it held the weight of the world. Together. The word was a balm on the wounded parts of my soul. We weren't ignoring the past or pretending it didn't exist. We were acknowledging it, clearing it, and choosing to build something new and stronger in its place. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was my sister Sarah. Her calls were always a source of low-grade dread. She meant well, but her version of support often felt like judgment wrapped in concern. "Hey, Alara," she started, her voice a little too bright. "Just calling to check in. How's the back?" "It's fine, Sarah. All better." "Good, good. So listen, Mom's birthday is coming up, and I was thinking, you know Mark from my book club. He's single now and he's an architect. I thought you two might—" I cut her off, my patience snapping. "I'm not interested." "Oh, come on, Ellie. It's been long enough. After that whole disaster with Claire, I just think you should give a nice, normal guy a chance." The phrase disaster with Claire landed like a punch to the gut. It was the family-approved narrative. My relationship with a woman wasn't a heartbreak. It was a phase, a disaster, an error to be corrected. In that moment, looking across my living room at Imani, who was patiently untangling a string of fairy lights we'd bought, her brow furrowed in concentration, everything became crystal clear. The fear of my family's judgment, the internalized shame, the pressure to be normal. It was all just noise. The only thing that mattered was the quiet, steady truth of the woman in front of me. "I'm seeing someone, Sarah," I said, my voice clear and firm. "Oh, that's great. Is it Mark? Did you already meet him?" "Her name is Imani," I said, the name a beautiful, solid thing on my tongue. "And she's incredible." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the gears turning in her head, the disapproval settling in. But for the first time, I didn't care. I wasn't asking for her permission. I was stating a fact. "Oh," she finally said, her voice flat. "Well, okay then." We ended the call a few moments later. The conversation was a small, necessary rupture. It was the sound of the old foundation cracking to make way for the new. I looked at Imani, who had paused her work and was watching me with a knowing, gentle expression. "Family?" she asked softly. I nodded. "The disaster with Claire came up?" She winced in sympathy. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said, walking over to her. I took the tangled lights from her hands and set them aside. I threaded my fingers through hers. "It's not a disaster. It was a lesson. It taught me what I don't want, and it led me, eventually, to what I do." I leaned in and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss full of gratitude and certainty. The fairy lights could wait. The boxes could wait. The whole world could wait. Right here, in the middle of my messy, unfinished life, with this strong, patient, incredible woman, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The pain in my back had been a symptom of a much deeper misalignment. I had been twisted out of shape by heartbreak and fear. And Imani, with her healing hands and her steady heart, had done more than just fix my spine. She had gently, patiently, and lovingly put me back together. We spent the rest of the night untangling the lights, hanging them in the window of my living room. As we plugged them in, they cast a warm, golden glow across the room, illuminating the half-painted walls and the stacks of books. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't finished. But it was ours. It was a start. Looking at her, her face bathed in the soft light, her dark eyes full of a love that felt both new and ancient, I knew this wasn't just a gate we were building. It was a home. When you've spent so long bracing for pain, isn't the hardest thing in the world to finally accept a gentle hand? If you've ever had to choose between a familiar fortress and a frightening, beautiful freedom, you know the journey. Please like this story if it resonated with you, subscribe for more, and share your own moments of choosing hope in the comments below.